Thank you everyone for attending. Really excited that you guys are joining us. This is artwork 2 or 201 or 201. This is a slightly more advanced version of the previous. So if you didn't catch that webinar, you can check Artwork 101 out, and we're sort of going to be building on top of that. I'm actually using the same files just to go a little bit deeper on those, as well as yeah, so even the same project that we use for the 101, you'll still see that artwork there, and then I've added a second project, so we'll sort of go through that. But so the first thing what I wanted to show you is on here. We've done this, the amenity IDs, and in the last webinar, when I set it up so that the amenities are actually left middle aligned. So when you look at here, you'll see that this symbol is actually over to the left side. It doesn't appear necessarily over to the left side because this one takes up the whole space, but it is left aligned. And then again, this one is left aligned as well. So what I want to do is I want to just show you how in this we can actually change the alignment of the symbol. And so I'm going to go back to the original Illustrator file. And this is the original Illustrator file, and I'll try and zoom in so you can see it a little better. And I like working in the wireframe mode. So if I do a Command Y, it goes into the wireframe mode, and I can see where things are here. And I'll just minimize this. So in here, I can select this, and I see that it's under amenity symbol. And then I can open that up, and you see here that it's saying it's a left middle alignment. So what I want to do, and we have options of a horizontal alignment and a vertical alignment in these. So there's left, center, right, top, middle, bottom. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to say that this is going to be a center middle alignment. Because it always stretches, you don't really need to do this. Middle is the same as top, is the same as bottom in this case. But it's good practice just to do a vertical and a horizontal alignment in there. So, and then by doing that, I export this. And so what I do is I go File, Export, Export As. And I want to export it as a SVG. And what I'm going to show actually too is that I've gone and I'm using artboards, and I'm using multiple artboards in one plan, and I'm calling it template 2.01. And we'll be giving you these files as well after, so that you can go and lay these out as well. So what I want to do is I want to use artboards. So it's going to crop it to the artboard. And it is the fourth one, but what I'm not actually too concerned about trying to nitpick between one or the other. I really just want to say, okay, I'm going to just export all of them because it comes out pretty quick anyways. So I export with the internal CSS SVG fonts. I want them to be editable. I want the images embedded. I want the layer names and the level, and minify and responsive off. And then when I export that, I now get those files, and I just want to go into the amenity ID sign. And now when I edit this, I can just come into my template, and I can come in here and say, okay, I want to upload a new file. And that would be under templates. And you can see that I've got those 4 files now. So now I just pick the C1 file, and I save that. And then it uploads it, and there's no issues there because I already had it in there. And when I come back here, I can now click on the location or click on the sign. And then when I come in here, you now see that it's center center middle align. So that text is now centered. This one here doesn't appear to be any different really because it is fitting within a box and it's still centered. And then the women's one as well as is updated as well. One quick note that I'll also pop in there while we're on the amenity one is Braille translations. When you're doing a Braille translation, we should have the text being as lowercase, so it properly translates it with none of the commas leading. And then when we're actually drawing the file, you'll notice here that we've got women as lowercase, but in here it's women as uppercase. And we did that in the previous, in the 101. So I started to stray from the 101 and gave you a little bit more advanced features in there. But in here, we actually had the left top alignment and the uppercase command in there. And that's what causes it to, now it causes it to be ADA compliant, as well as it translates the Braille properly. So that's a bit of an extra little thing there. Okay, so then moving on, what I want to show is I'm actually going to show, I'm going to create a new sign type, and I'm going to call it A1. And so you see here, I actually created I'm trying to make this like an easy bake oven type thing here where I've sort of got the sign already in its places, and I've sort of turned off some layers because we already did a lot of this stuff in the previous. What I'm going to do here is I want to take this A2 sign that I have that I'll be showing you some other features, and I'm just going to take it and I'm going to make a copy of it over here. And now because it's it's all in the same file and they actually share the different pieces in here, when I'm going to make changes here, so if the client comes in and says, okay, well, we don't like how the number section is being handled, I can come in and change these three tops just by making a change to one, copying it, or option dragging it over, which keeps the structure intact. I just option drag it over, and then I've got my three updates. I export the SVG, upload it, and if I had 1,000 signs that were attached to those templates, it's going to redraw all 1,000 of those templates. Okay, so pretty cool stuff. So this A1 is it's a room name field that I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually get rid of, I want to keep this occupant name, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call it room name. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it to room name, and then I'm going to take the occupant name and move it to room name. And that's as easy as it is. I don't have to do anything else there, and I'm just going to get rid of this field and that there, the text in the field. And there, now we have this room name. And when I look at this, I have a top left alignment, and this is a fairly standard alignment. And what I just want to show you is that I'm going to actually lay this out as a bottom left alignment. So in order to do that, the way it works is text starts at the point where you draw it. So from that insertion point there, and it draws it in relation to the box, wherever the box is. Okay, so as a left top alignment, this text is going to go from the left to the right. And then when it hits the edge here, it's going to go down because it's left top. So what I want to have it do is, in relation to this box, I want it to start from the bottom and work its way up. So I'm going to say, okay, this is a spot that I want it to be, or I can go a little more detailed and get my transform in here and say at the bottom here, I want to be accurate and I want it to start at 4.5. All right, so we've got basically ½ an inch around the edges, which looks nice. And so I now have that set up, and I've already got these fields already set up previously, and I basically had copied it from the other, so that's all good. All right, so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to export this. And again, I'm just going to do all the artboards. It's basically going to create anything that I didn't change, and it's actually going to ask me to replace them. But anything I didn't change, it's just going to overwrite it, and it's really not that big of a deal. So then in here, I now have now what I have to do is I actually have to create a new sign type because I don't have an A1 sign type yet. And let me just confirm one thing here. Yeah, so A1. So we've actually created a new feature, and this is good for sort of quick takeoffs. So I'm going to show you how that works here. So I'm going to actually right click on this wall here to add a sign. And then I can say I want it facing that way. And now you see that it's updating that live as well, which is, pretty awesome. I'm going to say that it's part of the 2.1 project, or sorry, the 2.01 project. And then I'm going to come in here, and I don't have this sign type yet, but what we've created is a quick way for us to add this now. So I'm going to say A1, and then you see that it pops up this new button there, and it's basically saying that when you create a new sign now, it's actually going to create that new sign type in there. And if I go a step further and actually include a dash, and let me just make sure that one space dash, and now I can actually go in and say, well, this is a room ID. And then if I hit return, it's now going to create a new room ID. I hit save, and then voila, I've got a new room ID there. So pretty awesome. And it's actually in here now as well. So now I can take this and say, okay, well, I want to put that right there, and I want to put that right there. Previously, I actually had to go in, and if I try to create it here and it wasn't there, then you'd have to come over here and do a new sign type and then sort of do it. It was just a real pain in the butt to have to go and do all that. So now what I need to do is I've got my SVG. I now want to add my fields. So I can go in here and I can either add a new field here, or I can come and edit my sign type fields. And when I come here, it brings me right to that room ID. So I could have, before you had to right click and edit, and now you can just get it all from here. And now I just need to go through the fields that I had, and I had room number, room number Braille, room name, and you notice that room name actually didn't have doesn't have a link to it. So it means that field actually doesn't exist yet. And then I have a color, level color. This level color we set up from the previous, the 101, and that is that is inherited from this location, which is that orange color there. And I think that's it. So if I have a quick look here, yep, that looks right. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And now it says, okay, yeah, you've created a room name field. So I can go and edit this. And then it brings me right to the manage fields, and then goes directly to the room name field. And this is a text short, and I'm just going to leave it as a text short. It doesn't need any other information in there. So now when I go back to my location or my floor, actually I want to go back to my A1, and now if I add my template, and hit save, you should see that the template actually connects. And there we go. And now there's actually no information in there yet. So if I go back to my level and then click on that one, I can now put in the information, and that would be 117. And the room name is training room. And you see that it makes the Braille translation and then puts the text there. And what I can do is to show you that if it does go to a second line, so training room, that should go to a second line. You'll now see that, oh, that should have gone. Let me just make sure here. Oh, see, yeah, sorry. It's still top left. I actually didn't change it to bottom left. So I moved the text down, but I didn't change the information here. So bottom left. And then I'll
David.
just go ahead and, yes.
Hi, it's Kelly from Envision.
Hi, Kelly.
We've been working with Shannon at HHS.
Okay.
And she kept saying you could do artwork in InDesign. Is this what she was talking about?
Artwork in InDesign or artwork?
I mean, artwork in SignAgent.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, because we didn't know what she was talking about, but this clarifies it, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so let me just make sure that I actually exported that. Sometimes you get into autopilot here. So I'm going to use artboards. Yeah, I did export it. Okay, so now when I come around and I'm going to put this back in here and then go to back to my template and choose the A1 and then go back to the level here. There we go. So it has the, it's gone basically starting from here. When it goes to a second line, then it sort of jumps up to the next line. And this is a little harsh of a break. So you can come back into the Illustrator file. And if I select this, you can see that there's actually a 46.5 point. And there's actually a really cool plugin here called Size Cap. And if I do a get cap height, it shows me what my my cap height is for the text that I've selected here, and then it shows me the leading for it as well. And you can do it in points, or you can do it in millimeters or inches, which is a neat thing when you're trying to look at the drawing packages and trying to make it match. So, but for now we had this 46.5, but here there was a 62. So that was a really big space. So if I just change that to the 46, I'll save this and then I will export it one more time. And that should make that space much, much smaller. And the text box, as well as what I'm using here, is actually, it's a one-liner. I could have made this a larger text box, which would allow me to actually type in or hit a return in that spot where I want that return. Right now, if you wanted to do a return in here, you can do an HTML sort of arrow, BR arrow, and then it'll sort of do a break in that specific spot. So I'm going to leave that off for now, and I'm just going to edit the room ID. And then I'll go to my template and then pick it one more time. And then I'll go to location. There, and so that's much closer. And then if I wanted it training room, or training room, whatever, but for now, just put the BR in there, and then it will do the break at the appropriate spot. Okay. So now I'm going to move on to a target alignment, and the target alignment is a fairly new feature. And what I'm going to show is I'll explain how it's drawn in Illustrator. And that's actually all on A2 artboard here. And this is my office ID, or my occupant ID. Or no, I think I called it office ID. So A2 office ID. But in here, what I did is I actually created, so again, it's the same top information that I just dragged over, right? And then I have my occupant name and my occupant title. What I've done here though is I've actually gone in and I've said the occupant name is here, right? And then I have the occupant title, which is actually just president, in a box that's identical size to where the other one is. But what I've said is that in my in here, I have an additional piece of information that I can add to it now. And there's a command that you can now say that this text I want to be left top aligned in this box, and then I want the leading of 46.5. I'm just going to turn my light back on here, so that's good. So it's 46.5, and then I want it to be, I want this object occupant title to be aligned top to bottom occupant name, and I wanted a distance of 1.25 or 1/8 of an inch between that. So what it does is it actually goes in and draws, it draws this information, and you have to draw it where this one gets drawn first. And then, so this occupant name needs to be above that, but then this will get drawn, and then it looks at it and says, okay, well, where is occupant name? It says, okay, occupant name is right here. So then as the X height of the text, it looks at it and says, okay, that's where it is. So then I want to align the top to the bottom of occupant name, and then it says, okay, well, draw it 1/8 of an inch below it, and then it draws it. Okay, so I've already exported this artwork. So, and actually, I'll just do it one more time just to, I think everything, maybe I had it turned off, so maybe it didn't show up. So File, Export As, use artboards, replace all. Okay, in this case, I actually have that office ID already set up. So I'm just going to come in here, and then I'm going to look at my fields. I left the fields in there already. So basically I can just come in here and actually the template's there already too. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm going to add it to this one here. So the A2, and then I've got that in there. And now I can come to my floor plan, and then I'll add an office ID there. So that's where that goes. Office ID, the default state in 201. I'll hit save. Drops the pin on that spot. I have my blank field here. It's weird that this is 117 as well. At this point, I'd probably say, hey, you need to consult us for a room numbering project, or you can do that and get extra funds there. And then I'm just going to use, I guess, my name here, David Juritzma, because I know how to spell it, and president. And then there we go. So it takes it, draws this, and then says, okay, the next thing, I need it to go, and I need it to draw president 1/8 of an inch below it. Now, the neat thing here is that if this goes to 2 lines, so, and again, I'm not going to be too creative here, and I'm just going to put my name twice, but it could be like David Juritsma, MD, CRBE, all those, you know, acronyms that our clients love to put in there. And again, you can see that it goes and it finds where the text finished off, and then says, okay, 1/8 of an inch, and then my return. And again, it's doing that weird space here. And then I can come in here and say, okay, well, I want to, I can look at this and find out and say, the leading here is actually, this is what it should have been. So then I'll come in here, open up here and say, yeah, leading here is wrong. There we go. And then I can, again, just file, export all of this, artboards. There we go. So it looks a little better. Again, you have control over how all of that, how all of this works, and you can basically play with those spacings, the alignments, and the lettings, and get that all looking exactly how you want it to look. Okay, so I'm going to try and leave time for questions near the end. And I want to move on to the directional signs now. And the directional signs, and actually I'll just say one thing here is that, like, you may be looking at this and going, you know, it looks like it's, you know, it's taking a fair amount of time to do this and set this up. But it's really it's about tying your shoelaces before running a marathon and sort of getting things right. And then once you have things right, when you need to call on this project down the road, and the client says, okay, you know, David's being fired and, you know, Jesse Hook is now the president, they can actually self-maintain this, and you can set it up so that they could just go in and type in Jesse Hook and get rid of me and hit return, and it remembers the color schemes, it remembers the fonts and the layouts and all the styles that you put in there. So then the sign fabricator can then just be invited right into the system, download the PDF or download the text, or download the SVG, and they can make the sign. So and in actuality, I also, in trying to sort of reverse engineer the next part of this, I actually went and sort of drew this sample file, and the amount of the time that it took me to do this file here to try and make it so that I can show you how to do it the other way. There were so many chances for mistakes. Like if I wanted an arrow to be here, then I'd have to go and select this and say, kind of take this and drag it down to here, and then, you know, get rid of this and look at a grid and do all these things that it was just kind of like, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, this is, you know, we're onto something here. So yeah, so now I'm going to transition to the multi-line side of things, and this is basically a sample directional sign, and this is probably going to take up the majority of the rest of the time here. But so what I did is I just drew this sign. Let's say this is a typical sign. I expect you guys will be much more creative in your designs, but just to know that the concept works here just as it would in every other sort of sign drawing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating a structure for this. And so in the structure, what we want to do is we want to have a layer called sign, or it can be called preview. And then what I want to do is I want to create a layer, a sublayer to sign. And we want to call this layer column. And what we want to do here is actually, we want to say that, this is actually a spot where we want to say this text is actually allowed to sort of live in this area. And what I want to do is I just want to say, okay, and this is an 18 by 18. So I'm going to say that it's allowed to live in this area, and it's it's a 1 inch. Here we go. This is the wrong. So 1 and then 1, and then this is 16 by 16. Okay, and this is the column, and this is where the text is going to be allowed to live and sort of flow in. Okay, so when I look here, that's where it's allowed to go. All right, and then what I want to do is in here, I want to add another section, and I want to say that this is the repeat area. And when I say repeat, I mean what elements here are going to repeat. And so we actually want to have this arrow repeat, or this box, this text, and a symbol. Okay, so in there, I'm going to say I want to have a separate layer, and I'm going to call this one arrow. And then I'm going to have another one, I'm going to call it destination, and this is just a text field. And then I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to call it symbol. I'll just take that and I'll drag that up here, and then destination. And again, this is more for my sake. It's actually, yeah, it's a good practice to work left to right, top to bottom when you're laying out here. And so what I can do is I can say, okay, I want to take this box, and I'm going to take it, and I can either redraw it or I can move it into the arrow spot. And then once I have it in there, I can basically get rid of the other pieces, and you can see that I still have that spot there. And then I'm going to take this text, I'm going to take it, I'll move it into destination, and then I want to draw a box for that, and I'm just going to take that box and I'll put it to there. And when you're doing this multi-line repeating, we're actually only we only draw the first line as well, which is a pretty neat process, because I don't have to then draw every single step. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to try and get it so that the okay, so that's in here, and that we want that to be a no fill, no stroke. And I'm going to take that and move it into symbol. And if I take that and move it over to the edge, then that all looks good. And then so from here, I can pretty much get rid of the rest of this. But I know that I did the math prior, and I knew that I could basically have a spot where where 8 messages would repeat in here. And I've got my arrow, and actually I had it as a left or a middle right alignment, and then under destination, I have it in here, and I can say, okay, this I want to leave, but this one here, I actually drew it as And sometimes it helps to switch between the wire mode and not. And then when I come in here, I say, okay, there's my rectangle. And in this case, I just want this to be a, I'm just going to say left top alignment. Okay, and then my symbol, again, I'll say, actually, I'm going to change this one to center middle as well. And I just copy that and then paste that. And then, so yeah, so if I select my repeat, you can see that this is the element that is basically going to be repeated within this structure. And actually, so what I'm going to do is I think I may have drawn this wrong the first time. So I'm just actually instead of moving this column up, I'm going to take this and just move it down a little bit. Okay. And so if I have a look at this, so I'm going to export this now just to see what this looks like. And so this is actually B1 of my sample 201 DRI file. So I'm going to do an export of this, export it as a SVG, and I'll export it into my templates, and I'll use artboards. And again, I don't have that B1 in here, so I'll say that where do we want to put this sign? We'll say that we'll put it in, we'll put a sign right here as a B1. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to say I want to put it that way facing, and I'm going to say that it is a B1 dash directional, and then I'm going to hit save. And then it creates that new sign. I can now move it wherever I want to in here. Now I'm going to edit this sign, and then I can come into the fields. And because this is a repeating value, we don't put the text fields in here, but rather we put it in this repeating messages field. Okay, and then so it's saying number of columns per side. And right now I have just one column. So when I come back and look at this, there's only one column of messages here. But this could be an overhead sign that has, you know, the typical airport. You've got 3 columns. Column 1 is all left aligned. Column 2 is all the ones in the middle. Column right is all the right aligned. You can do that as well. And actually, in each set of columns, you can realign things however you want to in here as well. So it's pretty flexible and pretty powerful there. So, but for us, we've got we have 8 spots here, and then we have arrow, we have destination, and then we have symbol. Okay, and then if I look through this, I think we're good there. And then I'll come to my template, and then I'll pick my one that again was modified most recently and is the B1 sign. Then I save it. And now when I come back to floor 1 or the new floor plan, it now changes my UI here, and I have these messages or these arrows already uploaded, and those would have been SVGs that were uploaded as visuals. And then there's also a series of symbols that have been uploaded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and recreate. Actually, I'll just put this in just to see what this looks like. So we're going to say arrow up, and then we'll say test or testing, and then we'll say arrow right, for men. Or sorry, that was arrow left, arrow right. Women. Okay. So when I save this, it's now going to draw the template. Okay, and there we go. So I'm looking at this, I'm going, oh yeah, this is too close. I want more space between the lines. And let's see if I take this and just say, okay, well, let's actually bump this down, and we can move this to there. And actually, Jesse, if we can add a text for us to fix this bug of that. So we can say parking C is there, and I'll remove that symbol. It basically, the images are there, they're just for some reason breaking those links. Arrow left, we'll say parking B, and then parking A, studio B. All right, so there we go. And again, it looks still a little tight in between these ones here. So what I can do now is go into this file here. And if I look at it and say, okay, well, I want to give a little more space between this, I can actually go into here and I'll draw a no fill, no stroke box that is like 3 wide by 0.25. And actually, I guess I don't want it to be 3. And so I now have it in here, and I just need to put, let's call it spacer. And then if I move this up to there, that should resolve that. And that's going to give a little more space. And then if I do the same thing for the symbol as well, okay, so I move that up. So we should be good to go there. So let's see what this does. So we have file export. So everything is going to start in the same location. It's now just going to, I mean, the symbol is still going to, the arrow is still going to hit at the same spot. The messages are going to hit at the same spot. It's just going to start a little bit higher. And each time it draws a symbol, it's going to draw that spacer with it. So that's actually going to give a 1/4 of an inch more space in there. So I'll go back to my original file. There you go. So now it's spaced that out a little bit more. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show is that these symbols, we actually may want those to slide left. And so interline alignment we can do as well. So similar to how the A2 sign had this aligning, you know, an eighth of an inch between the two. We can actually say we want this symbol to align to the it's called align left side of this to the right side of this. Okay, and so to do that, I'll come in here and I'll find my symbol, and I go and I'll come in here, and I'll do a comma, and I'll say align left to right, and then I have to identify my target, which is destination, and then I say I want it to be 0.5 inches away. So then I can go File, Export, use the artboards, come back in here, go to my template. Again, I'm always making sure that it's same dates, or sorry, same times, or very close to it. And then I go back to my location plan. And there we go. So now those symbols are now aligning the left side of the symbol to the right side of the text and then offsetting it. And so what I'm gonna actually show now is also show these symbols. They kind of have this, you know, the rounded edge, and they're black. So I wanna make it sort of look the same as these ones. So what you can do for that is in Illustrator, you wanna create an artboard for every for every symbol that you're using. And in this case, I just made it the same gray because we're not going to be doing any fancy colors like we did on the other time. But this is, there's no rounded corners, so it's going to match much closer to the arrows itself. I could say, okay, well, we actually want the arrows to be black and with the rounded corners. And then in that case, I would come to my arrows template, and I would then change these arrows. But for the sake of this demo, I'll just come in here and I'm going to say, okay, well, we want to update all of these ones here. So I'm just going to go File, Export, and then I'm going to use my artboard, and I'm going to export that. Oh, I want to make sure that it is I'm going to make sure it's export as SVG, and use artboards is on, and then it's going to export 5 copies of those. And then when I come in here, because there's already a connection to those two symbols, all I have to do is update the symbol from the library here, and I can actually batch import those. So I'm going to take those files that I just created, and I'm going to drag and drop them here. And then it's going to look at it and say, okay, well, these symbols, you know, these symbols actually already existed in the database. So do you want this file to match this visual? I could say, no, I actually want it to be a new visual. But in this case, I actually do want it to update that symbol as well. Okay, and then I can say import. And then it now says, okay, you know, it's going to take a little bit, but it's now going through the database, and then I'm going to get a notification once it's done. There's only 5 files there, so it shouldn't be too long. So actually, why don't we do this? I'll close that, and then maybe we can open it up for questions, and then I should get a notification when it's actually done. So does anybody have any questions? Oh, I see a lot. All right, Jesse, do you
I've been able to get most of them as they've been coming in. So I think most of the ones up there are pretty much answered unless people strongly disagree. But I haven't answered Marco's yet, so you could start with that if you want.
Okay, Marco's in Illustrator. Do you have to export? I'm not 100% sure there, Marco, but as long as it exports the same structure, then you're fine. So you can maybe compare that and just do a look at the code and then say, does it match up? What I will say though is that it is important. I sort of brushed over the importance of the when export as, when I come in here and I say use, or actually it's not the use artboards, it's important. When I come in here and say the minify and the responsive off, if you turn responsive on, what it does is it gets rid of the actual the dimensions of it, and it says, okay, well, we're going to make it so that it can fit on any screen, kind of thing, right? So then it will stretch or it'll expand to different spots, and we don't want that. So turning responsive off then says, okay, this was drawn at 18 by 18, so give it to me at 18 by 18. Okay.
One thing, if I can add to that, Marco, if you are using the export for screens, just make sure you go into the settings button on that page, go to the SVG settings, and make sure it matches up with what you're seeing here as well. So you'll have to sort of add that step in there before you use the export for screen options.
Okay, so how would you set it? Tony asks, how would you set it up if you would like to add more space between destinations? Okay. So that is actually one thing that we were hoping to have set up and have actually a much better answer for. I can show you what we're going to be having in the near future. What you can do though is if you can add spacing, like just make the box slightly bigger or smaller, and then that should give a different, different spacing between there. But what I'll explain now, that'll be a better answer here, is that this align left to right destination, we're actually building out a much more advanced version of that, so that you can actually apply it to the repeat. So in here, you would say repeat, and you would say align. You'd actually say, you can say destination align top to bottom. And then you say destination, and then you can pick the actual spacing between the two destinations. So in that case, then what you'll be able to do is you can draw this as a two-liner, and you can set the leading so that it's tighter when it's shared information but runs two lines, versus, and then the next line below it will have that spacing exactly how you wanted it here. So we're hoping to have that out very, very shortly, but it just didn't. We just couldn't get it out for this webinar.
One thing I might add to that as well is to Tony, if you're using repeating messages, you do have the ability to specify a specific height for the line. If it's not going to vary from line to line, you can set a height that you want each line to be so that it's kind of consistent for each one.
Yeah, that's right. So in that case, what you can do here is I'll put this back down. And if it's a single line and you want more space, you can create a and there's a tutorial for this where you can create a separate field and call it height, and then you can draw it and say, okay, well, this is the space that I want. And if it's a no fill, no stroke, what it's going to do then is it'll take everything that's in here and it'll draw the next line there, and the next line, and the next line, and the next line. And what it does is it actually bases it on the height. It actually throws out all the other information. So you could actually do if this was, say, what I'm going to do is there times this by 2. So let's say it's that size, and then I can say, okay, actually I want my arrow to be a double-sized arrow. Then I can times that by 2. And then actually in the height, what I want to do then is I want to say that I actually I want the height to go here, and I want the double-sized arrow. How it's set up right now without the height is when you would draw this, you would basically draw, and it would go like this and that. But when you specify the height, as we're doing right now, it just says, it actually draws it like this, and it ignores the overall and says, okay, draw me like this. And then you get it so that the arrow fills out here, and then you would just leave the second line blank, but then you have a double-sized arrow, and then a message, and then if you did the fourth line as an arrow, that would be a large arrow again. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so Matthew's asking, the commas in the Braille. That would have probably back to the uppercase. When you type in uppercase, it will start off, if you type in completely uppercase text, so like men, but capital M, capital E, capital N. When it translates that Braille, it looks at it and says, oh, you're shouting. So we need to add comma, comma, and that says to the reader, this is what it is. It's a shout at you, but in actuality, ADA is just, it's there for the reading by the finger and the characters. So it's actually not a shout. So what we need to do is do a lowercase, and then in the Illustrator, you need to say uppercase, and that is where is that? That's right here. That amenity is being uppercase. So even right here, I mean, I have it as uppercase here, but I'm basically saying that it needs to be uppercase, and then that resolves it. So